Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching from in the world. Welcome to, I believe this is the fourth in our Toolbox Presents webinar series. I'd just like to thank the supporters of the Toolbox web app for making these webinars possible. Just a reminder of the upcoming webinars in this series. So we do have webinars once per month. Today's webinar is obviously 28th of April, the role of leadership in accident investigation. Our next webinar is a little bit earlier than normal, so it's the 19th of May. And that's all about learning from what goes right, learning from normal work, all those kinds of things. So if you're interested in that webinar, do go onto our website, the Toolbox website, and register your place at that webinar. So the webinars are here to support and promote the Toolbox web app. I believe today is World HSC in the Workplace Day, and what better place than to spread and to improve workplace HSC than perhaps using the Toolbox web app. It's a free to use web app. It contains hundreds of lessons learned from real incidents shared by industry from various different sectors. Contains something like 500 learning resources at the moment, and most of that's translated into 10 different languages. So please do go to the Toolbox web app website, so that's toolbox.energyinst.org, and see if it's right for you and your organization. So just a bit of housekeeping before we begin. The webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available in the next few days. So once the event is finished, and that will be available on YouTube and from our Toolbox website as well. And everyone who's registered to the webinar will be notified once that recording is available as well. All other participants are muted for this webinar, except of course for the presenters. If you have a question, there will be a Q&A session at the end, around 1:45 to 2 o'clock, so in around 45 minutes. If you have a question, please put that into the Q&A box. You should see somewhere at the bottom or the top of your screen a Q&A button. You can put your questions there. Please don't post your questions into the chat function. I believe the chat function might be disabled for this anyway, so please post your questions into the Q&A function. And just at the end of the survey, I believe you will receive a short survey. Please fill that in and let us know what you thought of the webinar, and that helps us to improve the way we do the webinars in future. Just a couple of slides about the Energy Institute before we begin. Firstly, if you're an Energy Institute member, don't forget that you can use today's webinar towards your continuous professional development. And of course, if you're a member of another organization, then you may be able to get CPD points or use this in a similar way. Who are the Energy Institute? So we are a professional body for the global energy industry. We deliver good practice, knowledge and professionalism. And what does that mean in practice? Well, we're a membership organisation. We have around 20,000 members based all over the world. If you have an interest or work in energy, then consider becoming a member of us and the various benefits that brings. We produce hundreds we have published, I should say, hundreds of good practice guidance documents, as well as standards, all sorts of different topics, from human factors to process safety, asset integrity, aviation refueling. Do check out the publishing.energyinst.org website. A lot of our materials are available free of charge. We're also a training organisation, so we provide training on various different topics. The example on the screen is our Human Performance Pathway. which is a qualification aimed at 3 different levels of people who need to know something about human performance. And trust me, most people need to know something about human performance. And we've got courses suitable for various different levels. And we also have training on things such as fatigue and asset integrity, energy management, and various other topics. Right, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's topic. So the role of leadership in accident investigations. We've got 4 excellent speakers today, based in 3 different time zones. So that's me on the right. I always forget to introduce myself at the start of these. So I'm Stuart King. I'm the Good Practice Manager for Human Performance and Power Systems at the Energy Institute. If you've been on these webinars before, you'll probably know me by now. I will be moderating today's webinar. So what I'll do is let me just introduce the speakers in order before I hand over to them. So our first speaker today is Willem Peuscher. So Willem is an operational safety and emergency response expert. He's gained extensive operational safety and HSE learning development experience at Shell Upstream. He's also a partner at Versat LCC, a virtual safety learning company that develops and produces and sells virtual safety learning materials, learning platforms, and learning services. Willem is also a member of the Safety Leaders Foundation and the Stichting Tripod Foundation. Our second speaker is Dr. Victoria Murphy. And now Victoria is an academic researcher at the Open University and an independent consultant. Her research combines perspectives from education and organisation studies to find better ways for high-risk industries to learn from incidents. And of course, we've heard from Victoria on one of our previous webinars as well. Our third speaker is Elena Blardony, and Elena is a highly qualified mechanical engineer specialising in energy, working as an incident management, human factors and safety culture consultant at Repsol. Elena's areas of expertise include incident communication, investigation, improvement actions, management, lessons learned, human factors and safety culture. Elena is also a member of the Energy Institute's Learning from Incidents Steering Committee. And our last speaker is John Sherban. John is a proactive and reactive risk management consultant, highly experienced in developing and delivering various practical risk management learning events. He's passionate about helping organisations understand and improve their operational effectiveness and believes that maturing an effective organisational culture is the route to improved overall business performance. So welcome to our 4 speakers, and I will hand over, if I can get back to the slides, to Willem Peuscher. Willem, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Stuart, and thank you for the introduction. Maybe I can shortly introduce me a little bit further. I have indeed worked more than 30 years for Shell in various leadership positions in the downstream and upstream business, but also later on in the health and the safety manager's role. And in all these functions, I came across, let's say, with incidents and learning from incidents, but also the emotional connect to incidents of, especially when they happen to your colleagues. And there you always wonder yourself, what could I have done differently? And that learning from incidents concepts is so important because you want, in fact, to reduce the number of repeated incidents. That knowledge I took with me to my newer roles in the virtual reality safety game outfit. And that is also an interesting area to think about how you can learn from instance via, let's say, a gaming approach. Let's look to the slides. I will have a couple of things to introduce. I first want to introduce the Tripod Foundation, but then also introduce a little bit more the learning from incidents concepts which we developed, and also for this particular and interesting webinar, what we have developed and which might be very interesting for you all to apply. So as a short introduction, I will talk about in the next slide on the Tripod Foundation. The foundation is a charity. It's based in the Netherlands, and it was set up in Shell in the late 1990s to provide, let's say, the intellectual property of the tripod bed and methodology to an independent organization, so that more people outside Shell were able to use that tripod investigation methodology. And that methodology, I do not know whether you know it in quite a bit of detail, but in fact, the methodology is having a structured approach on trying to find the facts, but also facts around why people acted as they acted, and try to understand, let's say, the conditional and contextual elements, why people behaved in a certain way. It's for certain not blaming people what they did, it's trying to understand what they did. And based on these learnings, you are able to make very good recommendations and improvements. And a couple of examples are the development of the life-saving rules, which also were based on the tripod methodology thinking. Also, the foundation is involved in, let's say, the training and accreditation of investigators, because if you want to do a good investigation, you need also a good investigator, which knows the methodology well and is able to execute and provide, let's say, the organization with very good investigations. So with the money we get from this accreditation business, we also invest in new projects, and one of the projects is also in this what we present today. Together with the Energy Institute, we are quite pleased that we are connected with them since 2012. They provide, let's say, the structure and the back office support, and also the knowledge on the bringing, let's say, products like we will present today to the market. In the board of the Tripod Foundation, there is quite a bit of people from different outfits. We have people from the science, from Job Groeneweg from the University of Leiden and Delft in the Netherlands, which are in industrial psychology. But we also have people from the oil and gas industry, the Energy Institute of Energy business, and also from hospitals. And from, let's say, learning outfits, how to get learning into the organizations. These people bring experience on, let's say, the basics of tripod with the Swiss cheese model, bow tie thinking, but also with the hearts and minds, and last but not least, the life-saving rules and how they were embedded. So that is, in fact, in a nutshell, the Tripod Foundation. And we were at a certain moment focusing on how we can support incident investigation teams and also leaders in the organization with better results and less repeated incidents. And for that purpose, in 2016, learning from incidents guideline was developed. And in that guideline, more than 50 experts from different parts of the businesses were involved, together with the PhD research from the Glasgow Caledonian University, and also from a research institute in the Netherlands, TNO, where they brought together, let's say, the learning from incidents concept together. And that is an enormous important piece of work, because it's structure, let's say, best practices on what different companies have provided, but also what university and research have told us on how to learn from incidents to prevent, let's say, the repeated learning of incidents. So that is, I think, the importance of this manual, but that was in 2016. And then later on, we also thought about a couple of key elements from this manual, which states that the really results of good learning from incidents is with the leadership and safety leadership of management, but also management commitment, how much time they put into the learning process. If the learning from incident is only put at the investigation team to execute the investigation and arrange for the learnings, yeah, then you know that it's not optimal use of time and effort. the leaders should be involved and also drive this process also to their own benefit and to the organizational benefit. So that is an important parameter in this manual, but we also challenged ourselves on how are leaders having the perception themselves to look to incident investigations. And for that purpose, we ask in the next slide in the IP week, that is the International Petroleum Week, and it is now the International Energy Week. We ask some 20 to 30 top leaders of industry the following question. And what are your thoughts around the learning from incidents? How is that in your company? And can you provide us some insight where we can work on? Well, it was not a very positive feedback because there's quite a bit of frustration about, although the incidents were reviewed, there's still repeats of incidents and similar type of incidents. And the other part is that there was quite a low confidence that the process they had in their organizations would prevent a future incident. And on itself, it's very key on this. And we asked also some qualitative questions, and they said, well, the quality of the incidents investigations and the facts finding, that is often a challenge. What you see often is a leader look to an incident and the facts are not totally right, then often they beat on that part and don't even look further. So facts finding is very important, and the quality of other investigations, so that there is an adequate storyline and also that people understand how the incident developed. Other part is once the investigation has been done, there are often many actions, and I do not know whether you have experienced yourself, but sometimes there are so many actions from investigations that you could challenge, are these effective? And are these actions really helping to prevent the next incident to happen? Also with an overload of actions on people who are already busy, is the challenge, can we simplify and look to these actions? The other part is that leaders often need to make change in organization because of the incident. And how do we help these leaders to facilitate the change and the improvement? So that is also another part. Maybe leaders want to change, but how to change? And also dependent on the culture of the company, they might have different needs. A company which is only interested in legal compliance have different needs than a company who want to be the best of the best and learn from every comments and parts of the investigation. So that is in a nutshell what we got out of the IP week. And then as a foundation, we looked to what can we do to help leaders to improve on this. And then we looked to the learning from incidents process, which is on next slide. And there you see that the incidents, once it happened, there are a couple of standard elements which normally are done. First of all, the incident should be reported, then it's investigated, and after and during the investigation, you develop lessons and think about how to communicate these lessons, and also the reflection of how the communication in these lessons will help. And then also last but not least, define of actions and implement these actions. Well, the more you go to the rights of this process, often the less structured is done. How many people are really looking to the effectiveness of action items out of many investigations in practice and see whether these actions are really helping the investigation and preventing the next incident to happen. Of course, you will have a cycle of actions back to the system before, let's say, the incident happened, and bow tie and other systems which can be impacted by the actions. Well, for the leaders, there are a couple of elements, and I will not go to all these aspects, but we come back on these. But first of all, to respond positively on a reported incident is important for a leader to do, and not blaming the guy who is reporting it, that he's spoiling the safety statistic, for example. It's how you phrase it and how you position yourself as a leader. And also that depends on what the outcome in the whole process will be. We'll come back on a number of these aspects within a couple of slides. But that is, in fact, how we positioned the different thoughts of what we want to do. So based on this process, we identified a number of areas where to focus. In the key messages, which are on the next slide, is that the leader, in our view, is really responsible for creating a safe environment during the investigation, so that the investigation team are able to implement and do the right things and ask the right questions, also on aspects which might involve the leader. The other part is that we believe that the leader, him or herself, also should behave as a learner, to create an open mindset and also to demonstrate to others that by this open mindset and willingness to learn, others are also enabled to learn from the investigation. That is also an element that the leader can do that by making enough time available to facilitate that whole process. And keep in mind that incident investigations are always quite a bit of work for some people, for, well, many days and sometimes many weeks. It would be a pity if you would not use that time which was invested to also to take the learning time together with a broad audience. And the other thing what we advocate in our material is that we suggest to focus on fewer investigations which dive deep into the issues and use these to manage change in the organization. Rather than having a lot of investigations and having only superficially touching on aspects. So with these key messages in mind, we developed a number of very good tools, which are on these slides. And these tools were developed by Dr. Victoria Murphy, which is the next speaker. And there were also pilots done at Repsol and the mining company, and we also will touch base on this. And the interesting part is that via these very pragmatic tools, organizations can improve themselves. And we also have now proven that they work. It's also to, let's say, the audience to see how that how you can do it yourself. And there are roles in this package for the leaders, but there is also for the people who do the facilitation of the incident investigation. So on the next slide is just the overview of what we provide as these very good tools. It's first of all being a proactive and effective role model for leaders. We have some nice way of how to position that to the leaders. The investigator support, how can you help the leader to be effective, but also yourself as an investigator to be effective. And then the Better Insight workshop, that is a marvelous piece of work where you can group together with quite a bit of people from different parts of the organization to get insights on the incident investigation and wonder yourself, what is my role in this incident and what could I have done to prevent the incident? And last but not least, the implementation and evaluation of the actions. That is often a low-hanging fruit, but often forgotten. And we have also provided a nice piece of tool for that. With that, I would like to hand over the line to Victoria.
Okay,
right, thank you very much, Willem.
Well, sorry, I was going to say thank you, Willem. And just to remind the audience, if you have questions for Willem, do please post those in the Q&A section. So, sorry, Victoria, over to you.
All right. Thanks, Stuart. So Willem spent some time there kind of outlining the motivations behind these tools that we've created and some of the problems that they were trying to address. What I'll be doing in the next 10 minutes or so is actually just going through each of the tools and telling you a little bit more about what each of them contains and how they actually address some of the issues that well, Willem was talking about But if you've come to this webinar, probably you're also quite familiar with some of these ideas. So if we go on to the first of the tools, you might have noticed when Willem was talking about that workshop that came through, it seems like there's a lot of two partners trying to improve the organization after an investigation, after an incident. You have the investigator and you have the leader. And these first two tools are kind of companion guides where we're trying to help the leader with tool 1 and then the investigator with tool 2 to develop the skills and know what's going to be the best thing for them to do at each part of that learning from instance process that Willem showed. So right through from when the investigation is happening to after the investigation. So tool 1 is a kind of an informational booklet that's really targeted towards leaders. And one of the things that came out of those workshops that Willem mentioned earlier was a group of different suggestions about how leaders should act and what their kind of ideas and attitudes should be towards investigations to help take learning from incidents to the next level after an incident. And that was really the focus here. As well, I should also mention my background on all of this is that I've done a lot of research on learning from incidents. I've worked with different companies to kind of map out what their processes are, look at the best practices across the sector, and look at some kind of universal barriers. So the aim was to take my academic insights, the results from that workshop, and also to really tap into the tripod community. There's so many really experienced investigators there, and try and bring all of that different perspectives together into about 8 pages. So it's a very short booklet. Leaders tend to be very busy people. If you give them a 20-page essay, they probably won't read it. And then package it in kind of easy bite-sized pieces that will help them to understand the different ways that they can help along the whole process to enhance learning and to make real change. So we've kind of put together 3 different personas or different sets of skills, if you will, that leaders should be thinking about when they're learning from instance. You have the advocate, so that's basically making sure like the investigation team has the right people in it, the right resources, if they encounter any issues, removing obstacles, but also supporting learning both during the investigation and after it as well. It doesn't just stop when you have your incident investigation findings report. Also being a role model and sharing your own learning, making sure that you're setting a good example for others in being open about what you've learned from an incident. And then also, and this has a lot of crossover with some of the things you'll hear in other webinars on this series, being a visionary, but with more of a focus on what happens after an accident, how to really show that strong safety culture and safety vision with things like, we have a whole section in this booklet on how best to respond with care and how to listen actively following an incident. So if we go on to tool 2, again, this, if you think of it as kind of a companion, because it's okay saying leaders should get involved in instance and they should be driving learning forward, but it's really more of a conversation a lot of the time. So you can't just focus on leaders' role. You also have to think about how can we help investigators to really set themselves up for success. And one of the surprises for me while we were actually piloting this tool is how well received it was. It's got a lot of information in it about the human-centered skills that investigators need. So just like with the tool 1 for leaders, we kind of thought about 3 different roles that investigators play and different sets of skills that you might need. So we have the teacher, which is all about explaining some of the ideas behind your investigation methodology. A lot of the time with things like tripod, some of the fundamental principles on which it's built, ideas like nobody comes to work to do a bad job, and context is really important in shaping the behavior that you observe. That's not necessarily intuitive for leaders. So being able to explain and set expectations about what's going to happen in the investigation. You also have the negotiator, which is kind of a group of skills that are to do with communication. It's thinking about your stakeholders, the leaders, and what their priorities are and then adapting the way that you communicate in order to kind of meet those priorities and make sure that they're going to be taking on board the most important things that come from an investigation. And finally, being a professional as well, making sure that you are doing at each stage the best kind of things to set up leaders for success when it comes to embedding learning and making sure people actually make beneficial changes following the incidents. So also some things to do with bias as well in that one. So this was, yeah, we piloted this and we took it to a couple of different groups and communities of investigators. And it was, to me, it was really surprising how well received this was. A lot of the feedback we got was that as an investigator, you do your technical training in whatever incident investigation methodology your company favors. But then when it comes to actually using it to make changes and help the organization learn, there's a lot of skills around that aren't necessarily coded in the training. And this actually fits very nicely into that gap. If we come on to tool 3, I won't go into too much detail with this because you're about to have 2 presentations with the findings of this result. But if you think about tool 1 and tool 2, a kind of informational booklets you can easily pass to like a new investigator or a leader who's really enthusiastic about learning. The Better Insights workshop was a very specific and practical tool to help facilitate that communication, specifically after the investigation has found its findings, and to tackle some of those things that Willem brought up about, okay, there's too many findings, so we don't actually learn anything. And we don't perhaps have, we need to be able to communicate better and really prioritize some of these things for leadership to focus on. The workshop is a little bit different to most workshops that you'll have attended. And it's kind of based on 2 evidence-backed approaches. The first is that information is kind of delivered in chunks. If you think about perhaps what happens in a lot of companies, leaders will be given a very long report. And what psychology has found is that if you give people a lot of information, they'll very quickly start making assumptions about what happened. So if I describe the facts of an event or an incident that happened, immediately people start thinking about and making assumptions about why that might have happened, almost before they've heard the investigation findings. So giving information in chunks, little bit by little bit, and making those kind of thinking processes visible is something that's core to the workshop, to stop people jumping to conclusions and making assumptions about what needs to happen next. The other thing is that often, again, when we're talking to the tripod investigators, the investigators, especially if they're an external investigator, they don't necessarily have the best ideas for how to go about addressing some of the issues that were found in the investigation. And in fact, the best ideas are probably going to come from drawing on multiple people within the organization and thinking together about what the right next steps are. So that's what a lot of the exercises in the Better Insights workshop are about, bringing people together and having good quality conversations about what should happen next. One of the things that's quite well known with workshop design is that if you put people in, especially in an all group situation, or even in small groups, you can have this kind of group think effect where whoever talks first, everybody tends to just agree with them. In order to avoid that, one of the other things that happens in this workshop is that you give people individual worksheets to think on first, then you expand to like a group of 4 or 5 people to talk about what everybody thought, and then you open it up to the workshop. So you really get the benefits of discussion without some of the dangers that come with the social dynamics. And as you can see, 2 quotes that I've just picked up here from the pilots is, one, it takes pressure away from internal investigators. Often it can feel a little bit like shooting the messenger. As the investigator, you're the one taking the bad news, and you're taking it to people who can influence your own career. And in general, actually having people talk together about what should happen next creates ownership. And then again, the second quote, one of the benefits of bringing people together is that you hear about the different procedures that people have in other sites. So you're not just in your own little world trying to think about the best solution. It might be that a different part of the same company has already solved the problems that led to the incident. Okay, and if we come on to the final tool, this is it's kind of a collection of small, short exercises. So each one should take about 30 minutes. And if you look at the academic research on learning from incidents, one of the things that's really clear from all the studies that have looked at what happens after an investigation is that often you have so many incident recommendations and so many action items. And people tend to do the easier to accomplish action items first, and then suddenly something else happens. So often companies don't get to those really root cause related actions. So this is what this cycle is about. We have a couple of exercises in it that will help you to prioritize what should you work on first. And notice it's what should you work on first. You leave some things for later. Engaging, so getting people on board, creating that sense of ownership before changes are made, so that things don't come unexpectedly to the people who are expected to change their behavior, change the way they work. Change, we have no exercises on, because you should just follow your change management procedures at that point. But then again, what Willem said was one of the things that's often missing from organizations learning from instance processes is going back and see if you've actually made changes that are going to be useful, that are going to prevent future incidents and accidents. So that's what that evaluate piece is from. So that was a little bit of a whirlwind tour of all 4 tools and how they're addressing some of the problems that both Willem and also some of the academic research have highlighted as well. Yeah, thank you for listening. I know the next couple of presentations are going to really go into depth on that Better Insights workshop. I think it's a great tool for being able to just pick something up and very easily start making changes that will help to learn better.
Okay, thank you very much, Vicky. So our next speaker then, Elena Blardony, over to you.
Thank you, and well, Victoria and Willem, because all fit together, and then how I will be talking on how companies as Repsol and the pilots that we have done, how we deploy this into workshops, in the learnings into better insights from leaders on lessons learned on the process. So Stuart already presented me, but my main role in Repsol is to drive organizational learning and human performance improvement, and I have been on that during the last 10 years or so. So my presentation will focus on these workshops with the Tripod Foundation, but as well in how do we implement those within our process to reinforce certain key steps. So if you go to the next one, please. Yeah. So we will go through, I think there is one thing that is how we are integrating best practices as the ones we have just seen into our processes. Then we will cover our learning model and what do we mean by learning. Improving our safety and culture means integrating learning into our operations. And then we will go through the getting better insights from learning workshops, our experience that has been very positive to help us along the way. And finally, a few keys of things that we are as well sort of promoting internally from those best practices to help improving the process, all the things that we have seen just now. Next one, please. So there are many good practices that have inspired us to create the basis of our process. As I said, it is key to operationalize these best practices, and we have, for example, collaborated with the CCPS in his book, Driving Continuous Process Safety Improvements, from investigated incidents, how to really implement learnings from other incidents, with IOGP as well for all the process for demystifying human factors in incident investigation, the role the leader, the role of the client, the one that received the investigation, and the team and all the process. And with IOGP, I was quite involved in safety leadership in practice. The characteristic of the leaders are highlighted, and 3 of them help having a learning organization. One is taking action for leaders, communication and collaboration, all supported by understanding how system works, how the conditions cause accidents, so that is at the base of the pyramid. And leaders as well need to understand how incidents and conditions through that. So those tools really help us. When we did a review of our process, we did several workshops back in 2016, and 2 main topics, I will concentrate in those 2, came out internally that were: first, the need of a structured learning process with clear roles, responsibilities, and tools. And second, leadership support for capturing, sharing, and taking action. So the key point we are now is to make the process more efficient. No, so that's why we are open to new tools to make it. No, and that's why we are here, and we hope that will help us put all of this into practice. So next one. So the model we build considers the process of learning to be one of sustainable actions. Learning occurs only when the process, the operation, and the culture changes, so that the improvement will persist over time, is sustainable. For achieving that, our process consists of capturing the learning, sharing them, and learning by acting. This addresses some of the obstacles that we identified at Repsol and must be supported by open communication and be permanently maintained by intentional actions. What is a lessons learned for us? That first is the knowledge gained through the reflection of an experience or process, and requires recording, inclusion in the management system, and implementation, that's very important, of the actions. So it helps us to share and reflect of an experience. So how can we do that better? No, so what we needed for that reflection is really something like the Better Insights workshops. It gives us a useful practical tool for new and existing learnings, for reviewing as well existing learnings that are not effective. Help us to facilitate simple and effective cross-functional knowledge sharing and learning transfer, where leaders and the operational front can be involved. And in these models, leaders should actively facilitate the learning process. So where I think that helps a lot with this cross-functional collaboration, no, with other leaders. So that's really good. From the top of the organization to the front line, and now with online tools is really good, because you can get all around the organization as well. Next slide, please. So in 2021, we first tested with Wiki, in fact, these workshops with excellent feedback from the participants. The workshops are a good fit for organizational learning, that's clear. In 2022, we are implementing the new tool as part of our company learning process, and we want to encourage all of our staff and contractors to deploy and promote it in their areas. It is a simple and effective tool to focus on learners and other areas can profit of them, and it is an excellent way as well even to conduct safety meetings and about any issue, no, as well as at local level. One of the workshops we have done is about isolation. That was the one we did with Vicky, and the latest we did this year was on the fire risks in buildings, and both of them there was people from all across the company, and one from upstream, downstream, and we got almost about 15 people. You can do about 15 in 3 groups, and I think we have adjusted the timing, but 2 hours and a half will be good for doing those workshops. And what are the workshops about? I mean, Vicky has tell us a little bit about it, but they consist in 3 exercises. Each of one is an individual and group reflection, and it is essential, I mean, to control the time very well, so it's not too long, and people really get engaged with the methodology. In the first exercise, that takes about 1 hour, we focus on what happened with a presentation only with the description of the incident, without going into the causes. And it helps to gain a better understanding, individual understanding, through structured thinking of what each participant see, what they think about what happened, and what they wonder about the incident. And they as well suggest already a list of recommendations that they proposed of the case. For example, in the one of fire risk in buildings, people suggested to promote hazard recognition when there are potential fire loads, store properly combustible and hazardous materials, putting more attention into controls and inspections of the hazardous materials, and as well when doing modifications and even temporarily evaluate how it may affect the situation of all the fire protection systems, like detectors, like what are the changes in the fire load, the evacuation, the emergency routes, and everything. So I mean, there was a lot of insight of it, and that was very good. The second exercise, there is a more detailed presentation, including this time root causes and actions from the lesson. It helps develop better recommendations on ways to prevent similar events that works for us, and specific actions are reviewed. We for this exercise, we took the lessons that were done from the incidents that were developed by the actual sites and the specific asset, but selecting already a few actions that were meant to be good for other areas, in the companies of 4 to 5 actions. So the thing is that in each of the actions, each group work on one of the actions, and they were comparing their own ideas with the results of the analysis of that proposal. They commit to the incident event. They as well, it helped us, it helped them to accept the causes, and they, for each action, they analyze the pros, the cons of the action, and as well they reflect and they question on whether they really address the causes, and they suggest even alternative ideas if it's worth, and a lot of discussions and things come out from it. For example, in this one, it was suggested as well to use a more specific detail analysis, like a what if, not a general for specific hazards and for the specific situation. In the third exercise, it helps, is really, I think that's really good, is going to the role of each of the participants. Some of them were from the incidents because they were from the site where the incident occurred, and some of them not. So it was more what they would have done at their site. So it's, I think that I found that you get it from all the workshop, but helps to apply and promote the knowledge that was gained in their areas, integrating it in their activities, and well, I think with half an hour for this one, it will be good. I think that helps. That's a really good tool to help to. I think Willem talk about psychologically safe environments, and that case is a time for that, to create that environment where people can reflect on their own experience, think about their role, and allow them tools to speak up if needed in the future, to realize that their role can be crucial in many cases, and it will help to prevent serious incidents. So I think that environment, that helps to create that environment in which feedback on improvement is encouraged on a day-to-day basis. And there is, there is that environment of trust that we want to achieve, and that helps in the direction of, well, to help leaders, because we already within the teams we got people from operations, but as well leaders from different areas, and maybe in their personal days, depending on the environment that they have and the culture, maybe very often people don't speak up, they risk to have take personal risk. So that helps there in a really safe environment to start creating that environment, so then they apply it in their day-to-day, and so without fear, and anything of commenting things that the workshop gathered. So we plan to do another 2 workshops in 2022, focusing on the learnings of high potential events on confined spaces and transport of dangerous goods. And the good thing is that we now, once we have all the templates, we have the whiteboard, we use Teams with the workout groups, and then we use forms as well with the assessment. We got everything is just a replication, so it's really easy to do. We have made available all of it. In Teams, we have a Teams, and people will be able to register from different operational levels. So next one, please. So that's yes, that's the feedback from our last workshop, very similar to the first one, and the overall satisfaction is really high of the workshop as a learning technique, better than only reading a safety alert that is good for awareness, but that's to really make it more internal, and more now with so many organizational changes and people moving, that maybe they didn't have these experiences, so that's really good. Then it helps them to understand the relation between the incident and the activity they perform. They help us to make the company safer as well. They consider that it does, and to develop better recommendations. All of them answer that they will implement. I mean, they were willing to implement these dynamics in their areas. And the best of it, just to summarize, because there was a lot of things very positive said, that it was the interaction with other businesses and identify additional recommendations, share the discussions as well, the discussions. It's true that we have to say there is an alert that it does require actions, it does require to emit and implement actions, and so to see the change in the system, the way we operate and follow up, and I think it helps as well, those workshops, to tackle the effectiveness and repetition of incidents, not to reflect on that. So all this discussion is really, really good. And people found it useful. We asked about the frequency of the workshops and to do the dynamics, and for example, what is transversally at company level, they suggested, and we think that's quite good, twice per year on different topics related to high potential incident, focusing, we were talking before, was focusing deeper in a few incidents, because we got it clear that these high potential incidents related to life-saving rules and process safety, dangerous products. And so is there that we need to focus high potential, more potential if they are internal events, we need to advance, anticipate to earlier on. So and through varying different assets, and taking as well, of course, external incidents, serious major incidents. And at the site, the frequency can be more higher in safety meetings, more face-to-face, that you get more interaction, and the attendance is much more useful. But it's true that cross is much cheaper, and you get to more places that otherwise you won't be able to join together, from I don't know, Peru, from Bolivia, from Canada. It's very difficult to have everybody in a place. So that's very good. And next one, please. Yes, that's the final one. So we can, what can we do to improve the overall process? Not only I was talking more about the part of learning and gathering already best practices or things that are suggested, recommendations, but what can we do to improve the overall process, since the reporting of an event to the assessment and continuous learning. So yes, if you go steer through all the cases, we need to advance to normal to learn in normal operation. Of course, we need to create that environment that it was said before, and we are working now in several pilots of just culture, implementing a trust environment where people can speak up and can report. That's really, and leaders receive really well these issues, and then how to focus on the ones that can lead to higher events, the task, the situations that can lead to higher consequences. Then we need to improve all the analysis. We have talked about that to get better qualities, the role of the client. We work with the IOGP in that guideline, and as well we release a few communication tools to try to as well communicate to leaders, what is the role, the terms of reference in analysis as well, where they really sign up for a no blame analysis, that we want to really focus on the barriers or strengthening the barriers, and tackling human errors and human factors before, as early as possible, understanding why they occur. Prioritize actions as well, of course, of everything according to risk. And I think those workshops are really good to transfer and share that learning that otherwise very often don't reach, and fully the experience that was. And then there is a lot to do with system interrelations as well, not only the analysis, but more data analysis with all the opportunities that digitalization will give us, for seeing other issues, as that could affect safety. So there is a work to do there. And well, finally, I will just say that sharing is a key dimension of learning. And for doing this, I fully recommend the Better Insights workshops. It's an excellent tool to facilitate that communication among team members and leaders, and definitely it helps drive better solutions by involving people with diverse perspectives and skills. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elena. So if you have questions for Elena or for any of the other speakers, please do put those in the Q&A function. We are a few minutes behind schedule, but we're still carrying on, so please do stay on the line if you can. And our last speaker for today is John Sherban. So John, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. And just let me know if you can't hear me very quickly. Thank you, Elena. Much of what you've said very much resonates with what I'll be talking about here. Stuart, if you could start with my first slide. So let me just give you the context. I'm just going to be talking about one specific Better Insights workshop that I ran a few months ago with Vicky. Vicky helped me and kept me honest through the whole process. The context is I've been working with a very large company, a multinational company, for about 2 years, doing both incident investigations, tripod analyses, as well as risk assessments, risk analyses, recorded as bow ties. And through 2 very serious incidents that we analyzed, tripod beta, I use tripod beta, naturally led us to some very significant findings on how the business is actually run, which cascaded down into the various departments and the various people, of course, that had to make everything happen. And so when those 2 analyses were done, I spoke with the sponsors, and I said, you know, we really need to bring this forth to the leadership of the organization so they can understand what's happening, because they're the ones who can actually make a difference. And the sponsors were of course very receptive to that. Over the years, I've been able to develop a certain amount of trust with them. And at the same time, we had Dr. Murphy and the Energy Institute and the Tripod Foundation were ready to run some pilots of the Better Insights workshop. And so rather than kind of scratching around the surface of things, I dove straight in and suggested to my client that we run a Better Insights workshop with their senior leaders. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be talking about for the next 6 or 5 slides. So the client is multinational mining, metallurgy, chemicals. It's in that business. This part of their business has about 30,000 employees, and they mine and process gold, silver, zinc. But it's also part of a very large, diversified business group operating different types of industries, including financial industries, retail industries. They have a highly experienced multinational membership on the board of directors. For the mining portion, they're, of course, you know, they talk about very good ideals. They want to contribute to the well-being of people. They're focused on mining. Their challenge, one of their challenges is, of course, managing their critical hazards. And 2 corporate principles that they've got is that they focus on critical barriers and they eliminate recurrence by learning from each incident. So those 2 principles is what actually drove me to wanting to do a Better Insights workshop with these leaders, because they recognize barrier thinking principles, which is crucial to the work that I do, and also they understand that they need to learn from their incidents. So it's not about blame. They recognize that those are opportunities for learning. So I proposed the Better Insights workshop to the sponsors, and the sponsors made a few calls, and we can go to the next slide. Stuart, we agreed and we organized a Better Insights pilot. So what we had, and I can't see the very first line, I believe it says 4. We had 4 members of the board of directors of these various companies. We had 4 CEOs, chief operating officers, for 4 of the different companies that were related. And then we had 3 vice presidents also participated. Along with Dr. Murphy, we had ample resources to support this workshop. I won't go into the details, but we used Zoom. We had real-time interpreters in 2 languages. All the presentations, all the notes were done in 2 languages. And the workshop was based on a portion of one recent tripod beta analysis that I did with them. And of course, the whole objective of this pilot, it wasn't to test the pilot. That we did that as a side benefit, but we wanted to find a way to facilitate the senior leadership of the organization to gain appreciation of their biases and the influences that they have and the influences that those biases have on the losses of control within their organization. And then, of course, lead, we want to get them involved in improvement actions and activities, because they're the ones that need to approve the resources that are needed for the improvement. So that was my objective, and we used the Better Insights pilot as the mechanism for doing that. Next, Stuart. So the structure was, we presented similar to what both Vicky and Elena presented. We organized and structured the workshops according to the methodology in the Better Insights booklet, but we presented the information to mimic the revelations that the analysis team gained through the actual investigation. And I really wanted to do that to help the participants feel the analysis, to get them to be sort of part of that investigation and analysis team. So Tripod Beta, you can use this methodology, I think, with many different analysis methodologies, but Tripod Beta was very good for this because it just seamlessly aligned the analysis methodology with the information I wanted to feed to the participants. So, you know, the first was the trios of the events, and then of course the barriers, what could have prevented those events. We got into the critical tasks of the individuals involved and what decisions they made, and of course then the causal influences, some of which, so there are many causal influences, but we focused the workshop on the causal influences that came from the senior leadership of the organizations. And then the breakout groups, we designed the participants within those groups to maximize diversity. So not to have, for example, all of the 4 board of directors together or all of the 4 CEOs together. We mixed them up. And one of the things I'll say, that may not always be the best approach. Let me just say right now here that that's one variable that if you're setting up a Better Insights workshop, the structure of the groups and how they're made up needs to be thought about so that you don't get that groupthink that Willem was talking about. Next, Stuart, I'll just kind of move along quickly. So the workshop went fairly much the way we all thought it would go, because based on Vicky's research, this is typically how it goes. In the first portion, the first workshop, participants' initial thoughts and their reactions reflected their unconscious biases. They all had different biases, but the 4 that I think came out the most was the anchoring, the attribution of blame. That was perhaps the most common one. They have a hindsight bias and primacy bias. Then when we got to the second breakout, and this is now talking about when we started talking about the barriers, I presented some of the barrier systems to them that the analysis team concluded. And the participants in the workshop really started thinking, and I'll say reflecting is a good word. They started discussing numerous opportunities which were not implemented, or those that were implemented, but they weren't effective. And you could see, sitting back, I could see the lights coming on in some of them, because these are very clever people, very experienced people. And we're presenting and creating an opportunity for them to think in ways that they haven't been thinking about in the past. And you could see it working. And that was a real joy for me. And then when we got to the third breakout, they were actually discussing the influences that they personally had, the pressures that they put on people, how they make decisions in terms of balancing things like delivery commitments for concentrates of metals versus how they provide resources for various projects. You could see them now thinking about that and the roles that they can play and how that is structured within their organizations. That was the objective that we had for the pilot, and it was very gratifying to see that working. And Stuart, next. I think this might be my last, closing thoughts. So what I saw was that some participants were really truly enlightened, and especially the board of directors, the members on the boards, they very much appreciated our efforts to communicate these learnings to them. I'm going to say, I think about half really displayed their exceptional leadership skills. They came out and they were clear. Most of the VPs were fairly quiet, and some of the CEOs, they fit in between. And that goes to that idea that I have the variability of setting up the structure of the groups. You need to understand how, what the interplay is amongst the various leadership members at different levels in the organization. You want to get them all to participate as much as they can. I think these workshops should recur regularly with senior leadership, and it's hard to get boards of directors together, but if you can, that helps to unite the tone at the top that they set based on what their assumptions are on how work actually gets done. It tends to provide a linkage, a mechanism for the linkage, so that they really understand how work gets done in their operations. And I feel that such improved understanding then can facilitate resource allocations and overall business performance. It's just really good to have these kinds of communications. And the Better Insights workshop, I think, as a pilot, for the first time being run under such conditions, I think it proved itself to be a very valuable tool. So that's where I'll stop now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, John. So if I can have the speakers just sort of turn their cameras on and come back, we've got a little bit of time now for some questions, and I see we've got some questions already in the Q&A box. So if you do have questions, now's the chance to ask them. Just before we start the questions, I believe there might be one more slide. So Willem, do you want to say anything about the tools?
Yeah, well, I think it is the interesting presentations on the various parts of the tools were very illustrative. So if you want to test it yourself, we make these available and at a price at the Energy Institute. And if you get them all, you get an even better price. In fact, it's also supporting, let's say, research in future if for the money we get from this. So it's highly recommended to trial these and to test it, and what you get out of it is much more than what you pay for it. So I highly recommend this. Over to you, Stuart.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen now, so people can see everyone's faces. So right, so let me have a look in the Q&A section, and there was a question I see that actually was answered by Vicky, but I think John answered it, so I just wanted to cover this one very quickly. So the first question was, are the tools tied to the tripod method, or will they be equally applicable if my company doesn't use tripod? And John, I think you mentioned that it worked with any investigation methodology.
Yes,
Yes.
Even as we use different methodologies, we use tripod in upstream, we use Taproot as well, and we use CostLink, and so we use several tools, and you can use it with anything. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So next question then. So here's a question. I'll just take them in order as they're here. So the first question is directed at Elena. So how well do the workshops perform with contractors? And who frequently, contractors, because contractors frequently do most of the hands-on work at site, and I suppose are involved in most of the incidents. So have you tested it with contractors, or are you thinking about how contractors could get involved in them?
That's a very good question. No, we haven't tested with contractors at the moment. We have done it internally with people from operational assets and in different positions, but and as well with the in prevention, no, in more. For the buildings, but it's a good question, and we want, and we were thinking in promoting those workshops as well with contractors. So we need to see how to do it, and it's a very good point to involve. Every time we have done different workshops with contractors, they add so much value, and they sort of appreciate so much that you include them. So they are definitely what you said. They are first hand with the problems and the difficulties of permits to work, of everything that they face, and so definitely that's something to think about as well. Good point. Yeah.
I just want to open that question up in case anybody else wants to say anything on that topic.
Yes, Willem over here. Yeah, I think it's a very good question and very important to get these contractors involved, because often from their point of view, you will see a different company. You learn how your company is approached by and seen by contractors. In similar type of workshops we have done in the past, it's very good to get quite a mix of people who were involved, let's say, in the contextual part of the incidents. So yes, answer is yes.
Okay. So next question here, and I think this one might be directed at Vicky, but anyone can answer. So are the human-centered skills that are in the investigator tool, so tool number 2, are they also applicable for auditors?
Well, I'm not that familiar with auditing, so I'll have to take what I say with a grain of salt. But my suspicion is a lot of the core things about being able to explain and set expectations about what you're doing and thinking about your stakeholders, those are skills that would be relevant to auditors for sure. However, a lot of the examples and some of the exercises that we have investigators do as part of that module are going to be focusing on specifically incidents. So I think there's definitely going to be some value, but it might also, like, I wouldn't say for wide scale spread among auditors as part of a training school scene, but maybe as an individual auditor, you'd definitely be able to get something out of it, and you'd probably be able to think about things, the exercises in terms of your own work.
Okay. So next question here is, how do you deal with the potential problem that learnings from serious incidents have, which have identified specific management failures as a root cause, might affect some leaders personally and might make them reluctant to learn from failures? So if you've got investigations where leaders are implicated, how are you going to deal with that, particularly about these workshops and these tools?
Maybe I can answer that. I have experienced that many times. The fact is they are always implicated, right? So the solution is to be honest and transparent, I believe, and speak the truth to power. I forget who actually said that, but it's a very good principle to be based on. So if a leader is in fact a true leader, they will accept those findings and they will accept their fallibility as a human being, right? And they will use that knowledge now to improve how they lead. If a leader chooses to go a different route, that's their prerogative, right? But from an investigation perspective and an analyst perspective, your role, the way I view my role, is to speak the truth of my findings. And I've always found that to be the best approach.
Yeah, maybe I also can add to the good words of John. I think the leader should realize, if he behaves like that he doesn't want to learn from that type of facts finding and outcomes, how can he believe that others will learn from other parts which are relevant for themselves? So by doing so, by learning and also be open on this, the leader really can show safety leadership and get, let's say, the real learnings also embedded with others, because people will see that he is not afraid and he is able to learn from it. And that is where it should start. But I think there is also a kind of guidance where people, the leaders should be guided, like John is mentioning, that these guys are, should be guided a little bit in this context. And if you see it happening, that you also pre-discuss that potential aspect with the leaders up front.
Presumably, I guess a question for Vicky, that you've designed, particularly thinking about the better is Vicky still here? It's just particularly thinking about the Better Insights workshop. Presumably that's been designed in a way to sort of slowly get the leaders on board. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's what I was going to add to those comments as well. Like I have a background in counseling actually, and what happens there is that you don't listen to someone and then tell them what their solutions are to their problems, what they should do, because often people will just reject it. And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, these cognitive biases. Or if you bring events that happened to leaders and even the recommendation findings, they might assume, well, you know, the people on the front line, they were just negligent. It's nothing to do with me as a leader. But if you slowly break down the events that happened and allow them to have conversations and think deeply about it step by step, I think the best way is that you kind of take them on this journey where at some point they should realize the implications of leaders, and especially by focusing on what needs to happen next and having some reflection time at the end for each person, not to point the finger, but to say, okay, we all need to work together to think about what we can each individually do to stop future incidents like this. It kind of just shifts the conversation away from, okay, leadership were partly to blame to this, to leadership are going to have a role in going forward and making sure this never happens again.
Yeah, and as well, well, as well, not waiting to learn the hard way. Know that this for all the ones that are involved that didn't have the incident. For the ones that give the learning, is to recognize them and that they have given that gift to the rest to learn, and the others really not waiting for something to happen but being proactive, is to show that leadership is as well about ethics. They need to show they care for the people in our plans, for our contractors, for everybody, that we really don't want anything to happen. So really is a way to show leadership by, and is what people are expecting, that people are expecting actions. So we need really those sort of tools to convert this into actions. I know that actions cost money, actions cost time, resources, but we need to prioritize, and that's important. I think that's important. Mm-hmm.
Right. There's a sort of a bit of a follow-up question here as well. So, did senior leaders accept and acknowledge their biases during the workshops, and how tactful did the conversation have to be?
I didn't communicate to them the biases that I saw. That wasn't part of the exercise. They perhaps by themselves have recognized how their thought process has changed through the different workshops that were held. My experience is they will revert back to their previous behaviors after about 2 weeks or a month. But that's why I think these sorts of workshops need to be held regularly to help reinforce that change over time. So they begin to recognize the bias that they have, why they have it. And then as long as they recognize that they have those biases, they'll realize that they're never completely objective. They're always subjective, just like we all are, right? Like when we go out and we do an analysis, we think it's objective, but you can't be perfectly objective because we all have our own biases. And you just need to understand that and have your team check and balance those different biases for you.
Vicky, with your research, so the three personas for investigators, so teacher, negotiator, and professional, are these skills seen as new to an investigator in your research work? So how novel is this approach?
It's a good question. I'd say the academic research that I've done very closely aligns with like the professionals, and some of them are seen as new about like what you can do to set up the leaders during that investigation process. I'd say a lot of the other things to do with teachers and negotiators, it comes from the discussions I was having as I was creating these resources with experienced investigators. And I think I started saying in my presentation, I was really surprised when we took this to communities of investigators, how many people did seem to think this was new and missing in the training that investigators receive. So it's new based on the research and the pilots that we did. It does seem to be new. I'm sure it's not new to everybody though. Like being able to teach and prioritize stakeholders. These are concepts that have existed across business and any kind of human interactions and stakeholder engagement. But it does seem like they're not necessarily supported in terms of investigator training.
So perhaps a new way of thinking about it, but perhaps the things that good investigators are probably already doing.
Yeah,
anyway.
And I think when I was talking to the different communities of investigators, a lot of investigators have learned these things kind of the hard way. The experienced investigators have had their own incidents, so to speak, which has helped guide them to realize, okay, I need to consider when I'm talking to senior leadership, prioritizing the most important points and making the way I communicate about it align with their values and priorities. It's things they've learned, but you have to learn the hard way as an investigator at the moment. So.
Thank you. So would you have both frontline people and leaders in a single workshop?
Yes, there were people with a higher level, like more senior or leaders, and people that were from process safety or more technicians. No, that so yeah, that's a good mix of people. Yeah. So there was people that were people as well that face that were in the site. That so we normally that's good that there are several people that know very well. So each one goes to the different teams, so they can maybe giving more insights about the environment, the conditions, the situation from first hand. So I think that's something very good and valuable that we need to recognize these people, and then I think is quite rich to have these different sort of levels, no, as well mixed up, and I mean. And as well, what John has told us, that's a very good as well option, no, to have as well the senior leadership involved. So you can do several. I think with the idea, you can do anything. No, you can mix contractors, you can mix more different people and see all the views, how their views on what they can do, their role, and what actions they propose. It's clear that we need to make more use of the knowledge of the people that are at the different levels working to make a safer place. So definitely, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to make this the last question, and then we'll have to stop. So there are a couple of questions we haven't been able to answer, but I think this is a good one to end it on. So what are the top 3 qualities you'd like to see within a leader? And maybe we can get all of you to give an answer to that one.
I already said the 3, like for taking action, no, like as well, and communication, listening. So that's getting the people, the people hindsight of things, problems, difficulties they face, and collaboration between all, because that makes you a more from the system, no, a more systemic view of all the connections, not only the front line, not only the people that do the designs, that do the planification, not only the people that take the decisions and set up, but you get all the picture. So that's, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe from my side, I would say that the leaders should provide and allow time to look to an incident investigation, because it's a mirror of how the business process broke in one way or another. And that business process is represented then in an incident, but it could also have been represented in something else. So at least you expect the leader to take time and to spend time, so that others also see that it is perfectly okay to understand and deep dive in certain issues and understand what they can do differently. So that is for me an important one.
From my side, it's I guess it might be because of the clients that I'm exposed to the most, but I think what I need to see more, what I'd like to see more of is leaders that understand the complexity of what they're trying to do in their business, and understand that people are putting these things together in very challenging environments. And so I want leaders to become more human-centered, care for their people, not blame their people. So when somebody falls, they're there to help pick them up. And if I can see that in a lot of my clients, I'll be very happy.
Okay, Vicky, anything you want to add?
No, I guess almost adding on to what John was just saying there, I think leaders who are quite reflective about their own selves and open to their own effects as well. I mean, we've just been talking about biases and being open to that, and that's part of it. You have to be able to think about your own self in quite a neutral way. But when it comes to showing care and these kind of things, having actions that match your words, I think is really important for leaders. You can say safety is really important, but then if you never make time to attend a workshop like this, or if you don't show care, if you try and punish people, that's going to speak much louder than any proposed safety vision you might talk about. So actions that match words.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. So that brings us to a close. I'd like to thank the audience for all the fantastic questions, and I'd like to thank our 4 speakers today. So Willem, Vicky, John and Elena, thank you very much for the presentations today. And for those who are still listening, don't forget we have our next webinar on the 19th of May if you're interested in learning from normal work. So I bid you farewell and a good rest of the day, and I'll hopefully see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.